Good afternoon, fellow Plexers. Today's video goes out to Big Sneed, who asked a question on my YouTube channel yesterday. So he asked me to do a video for the best settings for Plex in general and for setting up his Plex server on a 10th gen i7 processor. Here's his CPU model number, i7-10610U. He's got 16 gigabytes of RAM, and he tells me that 15.7 gigs are usable, and he gives me a big clue that he's using an Intel HD Graphics 4600 video card, which is an issue. So let's switch to the web page, and we learn that this video card is from 2013. It's not going to be useful under Plex server at all for hardware accelerated transcoding, which is unlocked by a Plex pass. His processor, on the other hand, has Intel UHD graphics embedded in the chip as an iGPU. This is plenty powerful for hardware acceleration under Plex server. But here's the rub. You can only access that at boot up with a monitor if the motherboard has the capabilities of using that video chipset to connect a monitor to. So, Big Sneed may be using a motherboard that doesn't have that ability, and he needs to plug his monitor into something. And because this old video card is in, it may cause Plex not to see the embedded iGPU. It's kind of a sticky point. What are his options then? It doesn't make sense to buy a motherboard that has that capabilities because you might be able to buy an inexpensive Intel video card to give him the same capabilities, which would be a cheaper option than a modern Nvidia card to get as much power as what an Intel GPU or iGPU can offer. So hopefully Big Sneed has a motherboard that has the capabilities of connecting to the iGPU to connect a monitor to, so he can ditch this ancient graphics card. So that's the biggest issue before he can optimize his Plex settings. So let's assume that his motherboard does have a video connection on it to connect to the iGPU, and he can just remove the old video card. So let's bring in the Plex web app. Somebody's streaming on my server. So this is my server, and the rest are all test servers, and I happen to have a Windows 11 test Plex server booted up on my bench system. So we're into that. So right now, where are we? We're under General, but let's skip to the Transcoder section because that's what we just talked about. And again, this requires a Plex pass to unlock this feature, the feature of hardware accelerated transcoding. So let me prep this to what it might look like for someone who's never enabled any of these options. And this is new, HDR tone mapping under Windows. Well, let's say it's not new. To have it use hardware acceleration, I think, is what's new to Windows. So anyway, transcoder quality automatic. With things set like this, any transcoding that's forced on the server by bandwidth issues or incompatibility issues are going to be through the CPU, which will be resource intensive. Even if you've got a latest 14th gen or 15th gen processor, an i9, it's always resource intensive under any CPU. So the better and more modern your CPU is, you might be able to do a couple big, huge 4K transcodes, but most likely only one. And another equal large transcode is going to overwhelm your system. off from a GPU, a compatible GPU or a compatible Intel iGPU, it's easy peasy stuff for the graphics chipsets to handle this intensive calculation. So the first option is to simply enable hardware acceleration and save the changes. Then BigSneed's should look under this section, hardware transcoding device, drop down to actually see the transcoder available. And hopefully he's seeing this and not this. If he's seeing this, he might as well leave the feature off, unfortunately. So, anybody else, if you're using an Nvidia GPU or a Intel iGPU, this is where you set it. So let's just talk about my other boot option on this computer. This computer is something I built myself. It's a 12th gen i9 processor. There's 32 gigs of RAM, and it has an Nvidia 3060 12 gigabyte video card made by Asus. If I rebooted this system into Ubuntu where I have two different test Plex servers installed and only one can run at the same time, one is a snap package install of Plex and the other is a Docker container install of Plex. Either of those Plex servers, when running, they'll only see my Nvidia 3060 card. They won't see the iGPU built into the processor. In order for either server to see that embedded iGPU, I'd have to shut down, pull the Nvidia card out, plug one of my two monitors into the video output that's built into the motherboard, and boot back into my operating system. I can't see both GPU options. I can only see the Nvidia GPU option. I can't see the Intel one, which again, I'm not sure where BigSneed's going to end up, but that's the issue. So Windows, as a Windows Plex server that he's running, you can't easily run that headless like you might be able to run Ubuntu with a Docker container going, or Ubuntu with Kazaa OS installed. Those are good headless options under Linux, or Unraid's a great headless option. But with Windows, he's kind of stuck. If the motherboard doesn't have the ports to connect with the iGPU for his monitor, he needs some sort of video card or a new motherboard that has that option. And it might be best to switch to a modern Intel GPU, which will be less expensive than an Nvidia and give him more bang for the buck in the hardware acceleration area. So, for everybody else, or for BigSneed, assuming he's reached this point to use his iGPU or a new Intel video card, you first enable hardware acceleration, and I like to change this setting from auto to actually always see it, which I've done already. And when you do that, you'll see this next option pop up for the hardware accelerated encoding. You save changes again. Now you see this new option pop up. And it might be never. So change it to always. And then enable HEVC optimization experimental and save changes again. Now let me go to my newer Synology NAS where my Plex media is, but I'm not running Plex on that NAS. Let me disable all this. Save the changes. All right, so we're going to use hardware acceleration, save the changes. I'll change this to actually see the iGPU, enable the next step, save the changes. So this is the same option as under Windows. I think this has changed recently, so I can enable both of these at the same time. A short time ago, I had to enable this as a checkbox and then save changes to enable the second option. And I just wanted to make sure the settings changed under Linux as I noticed they did under Windows. All right, so that's the transcoder settings. And basically with a modern transcoder or a modern GPU or iGPU, I just leave things on automatic and I just set it for um, unlimited simultaneous transcodes. You can pick whatever you want. But with 720p and 1080p media, my iGPU and all these systems can handle a lot of those. If you're only going to be trying to transcode high-end 4K media, what's in this system, this 9th gen i5, is really limited to 6 of those high-end transcodes. So to be safe, I might limit it to that if I was sharing 4K media. Because I don't share 4K media on my regular server and my media is easy to stream stuff, unlimited works. So let me save the changes there. Then we'll start back up under, let's start with a Plex web. So you want to automatically sign in. That makes it easier. And you can remember the selected tab if you want. Save any changes you've made. Now this Plex quality section, this refers to the web app, not to the server. So just like your client app on your Apple TV, your Android or Google TV, your Fire Stick, your Roku, or the Plex HTPC client app or the Plex Player app. Those are Plex clients and they have similar settings. This has nothing to do with your server. So when we get down to settings for general, this is where we're into server settings. So you can check for updates here. This is where you can change the name of your server. It's best to send crash reports to Plex. That's how they help squash bugs. This is something unique to a Windows server that you don't see on a Linux server or a Docker container server, which is also Linux. Support away mode when preventing system sleep. It just sounds like it makes it easier to run a Plex server when your computer might go to sleep. I'm not sure how it works fully, but it's automatically checked on this server. You won't see it on any of the Linux servers that I have as test servers. You want to enable both type of logging options. And I prefer to be asked for an update, but again, this is not an option under a Linux server. It'll notify you of an update, but under Windows, it looks like you can automatically update during scheduled maintenance. I'd like to know and approve and start that myself. Okay, under remote access, I have a separate video. If I click on this, I'll give away my external IP address, so I'm not going to do that. The agent section is pretty much obsolete now, and it tells you that these settings only apply if you're using a legacy metadata agent. So if I click to the library section and I edit this test movie library and go to advanced, the agent setting won't have anything to do when you're using the Plex Movie agent and the Plex Movie scanner. The same is true under a TV show library if you're using the Plex TV series scanner and the Plex series agent. So this is kind of obsolete now. Let's click into library mode. Now, you can easily scan most type of Plex servers automatically for library changes or partial changes when applicable. And basically it'll work with any media that's local to the Plex server install. BigSneed's Windows install with Plex media on embedded or USB hard drives, you can scan automatically. If his media was on a, say, a Synology or QNAP or even an Unraid NAS, his Plex server under Windows is not local to that media, so he'd have to instead do a periodic library scan of every few hours, every 30 minutes, every day, twice a day, 4 times a day, and so on. I use the every 2 hours option on my own server where Plex is running on a little 14th gen Asus NUC powered by Unraid as a Docker host only install with my media on my Synology NAS. They're 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 not local to each other as in um, Plex installed on the same hardware. They're both on my local network, but they're separate devices. So this is what works for me. So if you're running a Windows server and you have internal hard drive or even USB hard drives, you can set both of these automatic scanning options. Now, if your media is on internal hard drives or on network storage, you can empty the trash automatically after every scan if you want. If you're using USB media under Linux or Windows, this is more of a dangerous option to check. So everybody's USB media could be different. One server owner could have one USB drive plugged into their system. Another server owner could have 6 USB portable drives plugged into a powered USB hub that's then plugged into their hardware that Plex is installed on. And if something happens, if the power plug to the USB hub comes unplugged from the device or the wall, or one of the USB drives becomes unplugged, these settings will cause Plex to scan automatically when it loses a drive or data. If this is checked, all of that media will be removed from the Plex server. If it's unchecked, it stays in the server, but it has an X across the poster notifying you that something's wrong. So again, if you're using internal hard drives, if you're using a NAS, network attached storage, this is safe to check. If you're using USB media, it may not be safe to check if you're younger than I am and you have little kids running around, or if you have relatives that come over with little kids and they get near your Plex server hardware, one unplug of a USB device or somebody knocking out a power plug can be catastrophic if you have custom metadata. If your media isn't named and structured properly or compliantly, let's say compliantly, my FileBot tutorials teach you how to name things with FileBot so they always scan in on the first scan. If you have a huge Plex library of 500 movies, and a third of those had to be fix matched as they were each added individually, well, if they get removed from your library and you rescan them in, now you've got a lot of movies that all need to be fix matched at the same time, and you might not know which ones. If 300 movies got added and 100 of them need to be fix matched, how do you tell which 100 need to be fix matched if you're not adding them back one at a time? So definitely don't empty the trash automatically with USB media unless you're sure it's never going to be disconnected, unless you're sure you're never going to lose power to a powered hub that multiple drives are plugged into. So it's kind of overkill my description, but that's the deal with this setting. It's a very important one to know about to then make an informed decision. I don't find a reason to allow media deletion, but if you're running a Plex DVR, you might want to. This is not default. I think default is 20 weeks. I'm a 62-year-old guy who grew up with 3 network channels, over-the-air TV, and in the old days, a new season of any TV show started in September and ended in May, and then the next season started in September if it wasn't canceled. You set your clocks by the TV show schedules. Nowadays, it's not the same. This default continue watching is 20 weeks, and when a new season comes out, it might be a year and a half later before that happens, and 20 weeks is just not long enough. So 52 weeks might not be long enough either. 104 just seems excessive to me, so I set it like at 84. Now this is how many items appear in your continue watching ribbon in the client device. So you've got a line of icons, and I don't really care past what I can't see because I'm not starting 20 shows to watch one episode um, to then come back to the second episode of any show 3 or 4 weeks later. I don't consume TV show episodes that way. If I have a show that has all the episodes available for a season, I might watch those over the course of a week or two, and I might be doing the same thing with another show. Um, so I don't need to bump this up. But you can do whatever you want. 40 is already too high for me. Naturally include season premieres and continue watching. And this kind of fixes this issue with a new season. That helps to continue watching. But if this is set low and this is unchecked, then they're working against each other. So with this checked and a high number here, that basically keeps a show that you've abandoned in your continue watching to remind you that you have more episodes to watch for a long time. So you could get away with a default 20 weeks if this is checked, because when the new season comes out, it's there. If this is not checked, you need this to be a high number. So you can just do both, cover all the bases. Video play threshold is meaningful in both the up next for TV show episodes and to tell Plex when you've watched something. If you are in the last 10% of a movie or episode and you accidentally stop it and you were waiting to look for some name in the credits, or you thought there might be an end credit scene like a lot of Marvel movies do, well, if you're at 91% of the movie and you stop it, Plex will mark it as watch, and you'd have to fast forward if you started again to get back to where you were. So this is just personal. By default, it's 90%. If it doesn't work, you can play with that setting. And this basically tells you when it's watched, either between this and the first credit, or at the final credit position marker, at the first. Basically, leaving this default and finding out it works means you don't have to come back and mess with it. And you can play with it to see what fits you best. I have an extensive music collection in Plex that I don't listen to. Honestly, I pay for YouTube so I don't see commercials during videos, and that gives me YouTube music. And I'm a podcast guy. I'm listening to that on my headphones if I'm doing a project or if I'm driving the car. If I feel like listening to music in the car, YouTube music, because of my subscription, is just too nice to use compared to trying to use Plex amp in my car. It's just so much easier. So I have a Plex music library I'm wasting basically, so I don't have any experience with these settings. I also have never owned an Apple product in my life, and I don't use Windows, so iTunes is a mystery for me. I've never used iTunes. I can't use iTunes. I don't know why I'd want to use iTunes. So I don't know anything about this stuff. And then basically, to generate video preview thumbnails or intro markers or end credit markers, this is all personal. I like to do things as a scheduled task and when the media is added, so that's how you see most of my settings. My processor is fast enough, and basically BigSneed's processor is fast enough too. If you're running on a low-powered device like a Synology NAS that was meant to be a file server and it's powered by an ARM7 or 8 processor instead of an Intel or AMD processor, you might not want to do some of these things. If you're using a Raspberry Pi that's a low-powered device, you might not want to do these things. But if you're using like an 8th through 10th gen or newer Intel processor, or even a modern AMD processor, it may lack hardware acceleration because it may not have an iGPU, but it's certainly powerful enough off the CPU to handle all these tasks without issue. So let me save those changes. Let's see, where are we? Network. Everything's default here except for this. So I don't have the article pulled up, but there's a couple different ones, and I think Plex even mentions this. This setting, list of IP addresses and networks that are allowed without authorization, allow you to use your Plex server locally in the event your ISP is down. Maybe you've got a storm and a coaxial cable line went down on a pole someplace, or a crew was digging a block away. They cut a fiber cable that ended up supplying your ISP for you. This lets you use Plex locally in your own home. And it's pretty easy. If you're set up right and you're not double natted, your router is handing out local IP addresses. Mine hands out 192.168.68. something to every device connected, both wirelessly and wired. So the last octave, I think they call it, would be 1. And then it would be slash 255.255.255.0. Save the changes, and like magic, if your internet ever goes out, you'll be prepared to be able to watch your local Plex client devices, as long as it's got the same connection to your router. So if you're someone running a fancy system where you've created different subnets for different things, well, if something's on 192.168.68 and something else is on another subnet, this isn't going to work. So this is for normal, not complex networking strategies. Okay, so we've done the transcoder already. Let's go to the languages. So this is server settings here. I'm going to automatically select audio tracks and subtitle tracks because I am a subtitle stickler. I have 4 subtitles where I need them, and I try to have both a default English and a hearing impaired subtitle for most of my media. If I can only find one, so be it, but I try to have both, and then I have the third, fourth subtitle for media that has foreign language sections. So if the audio track is set correctly to English in the media container file, which you can check with MKV Toolnix, and you have a properly labeled embedded foreign subtitle, actually forced subtitle, or a properly named external forced subtitle, by changing this option to shown with foreign audio and preferring subtitles in English, will automatically load any correct forced subtitle you have. Now what this also does is for any foreign language movie you have that has, say, a French, Italian, German, Spanish, Russian language audio track, and that's properly flagged in the embedded metadata of the media, and you have an English subtitle that's properly named or flagged if it's embedded, then the English subtitle will automatically load also, not just a forced English one, but let me give you an example of that. Let me go to my movie library. Let me go to collections, and let's go to the foreign film collection. So I have 97 movies here. And I can't tell you why the Smart Collection added in Captain America Brave New World. I'll have to research that. But let's find an Oscar winner, Parasite. So if I click into this, it's a Korean audio track, and the English forced subtitle is automatically loading. But this was probably before I knew how to name it. I just needed to name it English, and it would have loaded just the same because of the Korean audio track. Let's do One of the Dead. So you see it's a Spanish audio track. It's the only audio track, and that loads the default English subtitle. Let's find a third example. How far do I have to go back? I know there's... What's the chocolate movie? I was going to use that. I think that's a French one. Oh, I'll do a meal. That's French too. So the French audio track is the only track. And because that's not an English one, it automatically loads the English subtitle. So this is great for forced subtitles and for foreign languages when you want to automatically load the subtitle, just like any streaming service would do based on your language preference. So there's another language setting that mixes people up. Where is it? Where is it? Where is it? Is it under Plex web quality? No, general player maybe. So there's some subtitle options here, but this is a client option and not a server setting. People forget that the web interface here, the web app, is both server settings and client settings just for this web interface. And the web interface as a client device is lousy. So you really shouldn't have to bother with any of these. But I thought there were subtitle options someplace here too. And right here, under general, language is English. So this is just client settings. So let's go back to languages here. This is how you get forced subtitles in foreign audio movies to load the subtitles directly. Scheduled task. I think I run my regular server between 1 and 5 a.m. and I want to back up the database every 3 days. This tells you where to find the backup directory. So it's buried in the app data folder on this Windows server. And if I change to my regular server, it's in this configuration. And if I change to a test server on my older Synology NAS, it's a similar structure because it's all Linux based. So I would check everything except for maybe update all libraries during maintenance. My libraries are scanning on a time scan every 2 hours, and this just works for me. So if you've never removed old bundles or optimized the database before, set these and immediately head to troubleshooting, optimize the database, and clean the bundles. If you've ever done the Plex dance, you've cleaned the bundles before. But let it do its maintenance task through the scheduled task options. Let's talk about extras for a second because I can give a warning about this. I'm sorry, not extras, but pre-rolls under the extras setting. So I have about 20 or 25 Christmas pre-rolls that I've collected over the years. There used to be a pre-roll site that's no longer there, but I think there is a group on, I can't think of the support site. You can find some on Reddit too. It begins with a D, but I can't think of the name of it. It's Senior Moment. So anyway, you see some history here. So I set one a few days before New Year's. Here's the path to my Christmas ones. Here's one I set for April Fool's, just a single video. So when you do this before any movie, and a other video will be included, but not a TV show episode. Before any movie or other video, whatever you set here will play. And if you want multiple ones to play, you use a semicolon. If you want all of them to play in sequence, you use a common, but that would be tedious, right? So short 15, 20-second pre-rolls. They're cute at Christmas time. I do an April Fool's one, a New Year's one. I got multiple Halloween ones to play randomly, and even a 4th of July one. But the warning is, not all of your users will have 4K streaming devices. if you accidentally get a 4K pre-roll, and because they're only 20 seconds long, you might not recognize that it's 4K based on its file size. That will prevent whatever movie is being shown from playing if the device isn't capable of 4K content. So your movie will be 1080p or even 720p, but the 4K pre-roll will fail, causing the movie to fail also. I discovered that when I first discovered pre-rolls and had them set up. I've got a friend who had a 1080p only Fire Stick, and I had maybe, I don't know, 5 or 6 Christmas pre-rolls at the time. And because they were randomized, some movies would play and some wouldn't, but maybe the same movie wouldn't play if he started it back up at a later time because the one 4K pre-roll happened to come up before the movie. So it was pretty easy to figure out only because I didn't have a lot of pre-rolls. And if you go to dashboard, you'll see the pre-rolls load before the movie. And that's what let me discover it. So just be careful. No 4K pre-rolls unless your whole server is made up of 4K media. It just isn't worth it because somebody will have an older client device. Well, I think I'm actually done with the settings. I don't think there's anything I really missed. And BigSneed, let's go back to your issue again. Your video card is pretty old, not useful for Plex. And if your motherboard has support to reach the built-in graphics of your CPU, you can just plug a monitor into that and get rid of this card. If not, most likely an inexpensive Intel card is probably going to give you the most bang for the buck versus an Nvidia card. And what I will do, let me pause the video and I'll throw this up on screen next before we end things. All right, it opened off screen. Elapsoft has this hardware transcoding calculator for Plex estimates. I'll throw this URL in the description of the video. And it just won't work well for you in a cell phone. All this gets jumbled together. But you see all these different video card options. And it looks like you can check more. So you can make it less crowded or more crowded by adding more. Now these are just older style. You just click show all. I can't see that. I'd have to reduce the... Even that's getting tough. So, but if you do have something older, an older chipset, you can take a look there. And you can even search by capabilities too, it looks like. So anyway, basically, if you want to see how 4K transcoding will work under a particular Nvidia card, we can do the 4K, which is just taking a 68 megabit per second bit rate file and transcoding it down to 7 or 1080p at 8 megabits, or 4K down to 720 at 4 megabits per second. And this will tell you how many transcodes you can do. So my 12 gigabyte 3060 video card, here's the 6 gigabyte one, and here's the 12 gigabyte one. This chart says it's capable of 10 of those high-end transcodes. Well, if we change it to 1080p transcoded down to the same 720p level, and I find that card again, now it's 23 transcodes it can do. So you see the most powerful card here for that type of transcode is the Titan RTX 16 gigabyte or this RTX 5000. I'm not really sure of the difference or what costs what, but if we go back to the 4K to the 720p, now the Quadro RTX 5000 is the best along with that same Titan one. So this really tells you the bang for the buck you get for the Nvidia card. So if you've got an old, let's say a 1070 or something Ti with 8 gigabytes, it's still not bad for 4K transcoding. 7 is better than the iGPU that BigSneed's might have the power with. So you can kind of price out the Nvidia options with this calculator, and I'll throw the description in. So those are some settings, and mostly we're concerned with hardware accelerated transcoding through a Plex pass, because that ensures that your Plex server will always be able to convert a video to get to the client device. This is getting long, and thanks for sticking around this long. Happy Plexing.